Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. I have a conductor, Donato Cabrera. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tigran. I'm very happy to be joining you here on your podcast and now your Zoom chat.
Yeah, you've been doing so many things over the past couple of months. You've been keeping busy. I read a couple of articles about what you're doing. I also watched some of the videos. Tell us what you've been doing.
Well, I think for me, it was just to keep my sanity more than anything. Within a week of the lockdown, I realized that what we do as conductors wasn't going to happen for at least a period of time. Back in March, of course, we had no concept of how long this might actually last. And so I thought, okay, what if I'm not going to have a concert every other week, every week, which I had been doing for the last couple of years? Sure, I could continue studying and learning new scores, et cetera, but which I'm still doing to a certain extent. But what can I do to still remain the public voice, the public persona of both the California Symphony and the Las Vegas Philharmonic? And I realized that what I could still do was reach out and talk about music and share recordings in a way that, which is what I think is so important, in a very accessible way. And so I made this commitment, I think literally within 5 days or so of the lockdown when it started in San Francisco, which is where I live, of writing something every day that shares a recording, talks just a little bit in brief about a composer or a performer. And I said, I'm going to do this every day until I have my first rehearsal. Well, of course, I thought, okay, this thing is going to last for maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and then I can get back with my life and not write this blog. Well, here I am. I think I just yesterday, which was I wrote about Smetana's Mavlast, was day 116, I believe, and while it's gone on much longer than I thought, what it has done for me in this time of not really having any concerts, and it's given me a daily structure which I greatly appreciate. Sitting down and I've written a little bit here and there, maybe some program notes for this or an article for that, but I've never written every day. And I am not claiming by any stretch of the imagination that I'm a good writer, but the act of having something to do, whether sometimes it takes me an hour to write, sometimes it takes me 4 hours, depending on how much research I need to do. This has been a wonderful personal salve for our current situation. So I started doing that right away, and then about 2 weeks later, I proposed that since I do all the pre-concert lectures, they're not lectures, pre-concert conversations really from both of my orchestras, and I enjoy doing them. I thought, well, maybe I can create something like this once a week on Facebook. I don't know, maybe it'll be at most a half an hour long, and I can interview a musician or an arts administrator, and we can do this once a week. And it turned into quickly something that was an hour long, and it's gone from at first being just musicians, like I would normally do for pre-concert chat, into interviewing chefs, composers, soloists, of course, just the deans of universities. I mean, it's been really fascinating, and I have also really enjoyed that. But like you, I don't know what it was like for you when you first started doing your podcast or now doing these Facebook interviews.
Yeah.
The technology, something had to go wrong at first, and at first it just completely freaked me out. What if it didn't go live right away? And I had so many panic attacks. Now I'm much more comfortable with the format, of course.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've done so many interesting projects. I was reading with both your orchestras. Why don't you say a little bit about a project that you really means a lot to you? I'm sure every project means a lot to you, but some of the projects you were able to do with each orchestra.
Well, with the California Symphony, I'll start off with the California Symphony first, which because that was the orchestra that I became music director first. I sort of walked into a very an environment that suited me very well. It was an orchestra that had a very well established composer in residency program. It's called the Young American Composer in Residence. That's been going on now for 28 years.
Wow.
And its past composers in residence have been Mason Bates, Kevin Putz, Christopher Theophanidis, DJ Spar, people, and this was before me. A DJ was as I was coming in. But it has had an illustrious lineup of wonderful composers. And because of that, even though it is a small orchestra in a bedroom community of the Bay Area, the people that the patrons and the people that come to our concerts for a quarter of a century have been conditioned in a way to accept and to be excited about music by living composers, because it's part of the identity of the orchestra. Most small orchestras, they don't have the wherewithal to commission something every year, and it's just not part of their identity. And so when you do something new with an orchestra like that, it often isn't, there's just no history behind it, and it's very hard to sell it. I hate to use the word sell, but you know what I mean. It's just not part of the community spirit. But that wasn't the case with the California Symphony. And so I feel very proud that I have taken on that responsibility of choosing a new composer in residence. And the thing that I have changed, which is unique, is that it is a completely anonymous process.
Wow.
From the very beginning to the very end.
Wow.
In fact, all that I use, even though the administrator at the California Symphony, she's absolutely wonderful in this, she completely makes the entire thing anonymous. So for instance, their bio or their curriculum vitae is anonymous. I could, if I wanted to, look to see where they studied and so forth. But what I only use, and the other judges that I've used in the past along with me, the panelists, they get the music and an MP3. The title has been redacted. The composer's name has been redacted. Everything has been redacted. So all we use is the music that we see in front of us and what we hear.
Wow.
And so I don't want to see who they studied. It doesn't matter to me who they studied with, where they went to school. In the end, it shouldn't matter. It should just be the music. Yeah. And so because of this, making it completely anonymous, we broke what could have been unintentional bias of choosing a white male for every single previous iteration. The first time we did this completely anonymously, lo and behold, we chose a female. The second time we did it, lo and behold, we chose an Asian American. So it's hard to say that the process before had these biases in the past. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but they certainly don't now.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of that.
That's amazing, because I don't know much about composer competitions or contests, but this is great. I don't know. Are there others that use a similar approach? Do you know?
Not that I know of. I've talked to some established composers who have been part of competitions and residency programs, and none of them use an anonymous process. We're the only ones, to the best of my knowledge. I could be, mistaken in that. With the Las Vegas Philharmonic, what I'm most proud of is a slightly more general. I came into the Las Vegas Philharmonic the year after they moved into a brand new performing arts center in Las Vegas called the Smith Center for the Performing Arts, which is one of the nicest performing arts centers in the country. It was built so well, and it's something that you would never think would be in Las Vegas. I get this. I had this response when I walked into for the first time. It could very easily be a brand new performing arts center in a much more culturally established city. It's really phenomenal. But so in that, there was a sense of newness. Culturally speaking, artistically speaking. And I think what I am most proud of here with Las Vegas is that I have over the 6 years that I've been here, programmed a lot more music by living composers, a lot more music by local composers. It just so happens that one of the great American composers, Michael Torkey, lives here. And connected with the community in a more direct way, in a far less, I hate to use this word, but it's true, far less elitist way. I'm very much a populist when it comes to classical music, and it's beginning to really pay off. The concerts are almost always sold out. The people feel like they have a direct connection with me and the musicians, rather than this sort of like, oh, the maestro up there with his crazy hair. But it's not like that here. So I'm proud of that.
And your sort of community work started before even Vegas, because I read something with San Francisco Symphony, for example, where you had adults come in who are not professional musicians, but come in and work with the members of the San Francisco Symphony. You had a project like this. Why don't you say a little bit about that?
It's truly one of the things I'm most proud of. Unfortunately, it has, because of lack of funding, has sort of been put on a hiatus. But through a major grant, what year was this? Can't remember exactly what year. Maybe 2013, 2014. There was this grant to have a community-based program in which, on a first-come, first-served basis, amateur musicians would come in. Let's see, how did it work? They would come in for one evening. They would be coached. So if you're a violinist, you'd be coached by a violinist of the San Francisco Symphony. If you were an oboe player, you'd be coached by an oboist of the San Francisco Symphony. And that would happen. It was like a two-hour coaching session. Then they would come in the following week, and they would meet with me on the stage of Davies Symphony Hall. And the coach would be sitting with them in that section, with the oboe section or the violin section or percussion section. We would go over the music, and the music was meant, even if you hadn't played your instrument since high school and you're now 75 years old, the music was meant to be approachable and doable by all levels, okay? They would meet with me on the stage for 45 minutes. We'd go over the basics of the piece, and then they would disperse, and they would all have, again, another individual coaching session with that musician from the symphony for an hour, I believe. And then there would be a little, it was so cute, a cookie and coffee moment. We'd all take a break together, and we'd get, talk to one another. And then we'd all come back onto the stage of Davies Symphony Hall, and we would present this music in a private concert. And it was only for family members, and was maybe 50 people in that hall. It was very, very private, and was really more a concert for the musicians than for anyone. And it was called the Community of Music Makers. And we did this for orchestra. We did this for band, because there are so many people out there that play flute and clarinet. And then Ragnar Bolin, who's the music director of the San Francisco Symphony Chorus, would do a chorus version.
Wow, okay.
And we did that we did it once a year for, I believe, 4 years. And then when I left, the funding ran out. But it wasn't because I left, or it had just sort of coincidentally. And it was so wonderful. And of course, it caught on like wildfire. Once it would be announced, it would sell out within 48 hours. And we'd have at least 100 musicians on stage for the orchestra, for all three iterations.
Wow.
And so this project is again, we forget how many people out there studied music, maybe just during 6th grade, or they were in middle school band, or they took private lessons once when they were 5 years old and always wanted to do it again. There are a lot of people out there that just want that experience. And it was a very special project.
Well, a little bit about programming. You work with 2 orchestras in 2 different states, and of course you guest conduct. But how do you program a season, and how much do you program similar pieces for both orchestras?
Good question. I think it's in general really beneficial for both smaller regional orchestras to share resources. So the Las Vegas Philharmonic has a music library that has things that the California Symphony doesn't have, and vice versa. The California Symphony is around 30 years old. The Las Vegas Philharmonic is about 20 years old, but they do have a slightly different collection of music, just because they've had different music directors and different programs over the years. So there is that benefit of sharing resources. But in terms of programming, I have often tried my best to, if I do, say, a Dvorak symphony with the Las Vegas Philharmonic, I either program it during the same season with the California Symphony or the season afterwards with the California, or vice versa. Because personally, for me, both of these orchestras only do one performance. So to do a major piece, I remember, for instance, speaking of Dvorak, I did Dvorak's 7th Symphony, I believe, 5 times, because I was also I proposed that as the symphony for my guest conducting. So in one season, I did it 5 times, which was such a great, as you know, getting a chance to do a symphony again and again and again. Really, that's how it seeps into the skin. You can study it as much as you want every day for years, but if you don't go through the act of rehearsing and performing it, that's where you really learn the symphony. And so I try my best to do that, but it often doesn't work out quite as easy as you may think, because there's so many other factors. What new piece am I doing? If that needs more time, well, maybe I shouldn't do the Dvorak this year because it'll work better. But that in general, I try my best to do similar repertoire within a year or two with both orchestras.
Well, since we talked about San Francisco Symphony, you had a long relationship with them, and I think you might still have some kind of relationship with them. But you worked with Michael Tilson Thomas for many years, and he just recently retired. What are some memories? What are some moments that you are willing to share with us?
I've been thinking a lot about those moments, because as you've just mentioned, MTT has just ended his 25-year, quarter-century tenure as music director of the San Francisco Symphony, and I was there for 7 of those years. I was a resident conductor. I haven't really, when I'm in San Francisco, I as often as I can go to rehearsals and concerts, but I haven't really done anything officially with them since leaving. But during those 7 years, I can't tell you how lucky I feel to have had that experience, because not only is someone like Michael a great role model of what it means to be a music director of an American symphony orchestra on the larger sense, but his thought process, his vision for the future of that organization wasn't just exhibited in his programming. It was in everything they did, in marketing, in the language that was used, the outward facing language that was used for the organization. The sense of adventure wasn't just on stage, but it was also off stage. When I first started in 2009, it was also one of the last organizations that had basically in every department someone who had been there for at least 20 years. So The executive director had been there for 20 years. The general manager had been there for 20 years. The director of education still there. He's been there for over 30, maybe even longer, 30 years. So it didn't matter what department I would walk in terms, if I needed to do an education concert, I had a staff that had an institutional memory that you just don't see anymore. They were able to, let's put it this way. Every time I walked in to do something, it was, yes, how can we make that happen? Rather than, no, I don't think we have the money for that. It was always yes. It was never no.
Wow.
Now that's changed over the years, as it always does with institutions. But that was a reflection, again, of MTT. Wow. Was that yes, and how can we help you? Yeah. So on a personal level, on a musical level, it was those moments, I will never forget these moments when it was just Michael and me in his room, whether it was before a concert at Davies Symphony Hall or during intermission in all of the major halls throughout the world, because I would travel with them as the cover conductor and assistant conductor on all of their international tours. And he would tell a story about how he would accompany the lessons of Itzhak Perlman, of Yasha Heifetz as a 16-year-old, or Piatigorsky as a 17-year-old, or he would play piano with Igor Stravinsky watching on, and he would tell stories about how he would watch Stravinsky's rehearsals, and he was always fascinated because, I know this sounds sort of so minuscule, but it just emblazoned in my memory, but as he would say, as you get older, your ability to turn pages lessens because your skin gets dry, right? And so he would watch Stravinsky rehearse, and he would lick his finger, and sometimes it wouldn't work, and he'd get lost, but it was so endearing because it was Igor Stravinsky directing his own music, and Michael would say, now that I'm the same age that Stravinsky was, I now have to. Or his stories working with Aaron Copland on helping him with the orchestration of the variations for orchestra, or when we were in Europe in 2013, I noticed this woman sitting across the way where we were touring, and only a major orchestra can do this. We toured Europe for 23 days with Mahler's Second Symphony, his Sixth Symphony, and his Ninth Symphony. That's what we toured Europe with, these three gargantuan symphonies. And in Vienna, we did all three over the course of 4 nights. Wow. And for the rehearsal of the Sixth Symphony, I looked across, and there's this very, very elegant woman sitting there. And at intermission, she got up as well as I. We went up to say hello to Michael, go into the dressing room. And she looked so familiar to me and had this face. It's like, wow, where have I seen this face before? And she, was introduced. Oh, my name's Marina, et cetera, And then she came out with Michael at the end of the rehearsal break to the stage, and she's standing by Michael, and they're about to rehearse the third movement of the Sixth Symphony, and she was introduced as Marina Mahler, Mahler's granddaughter. And everyone, this sort of connection, and I was like, well, that's how I recognize the face. She has the same nose as Gustav Mahler, and it was just these memories, these personal memories, the connection that someone like Michael Tilson Thomas has to the past. Or here's another one I'll never forget. He knew before she passed away, this amazing composer, Broadway composer, just persona called Kay Swift, and she was George Gershwin's best friend. Wow. And she told Michael the story of how they would go together to see the Metropolitan Opera, her and George Gershwin. And of course, George Gershwin was world famous, and he'd have, seats right down the middle in the old Met. And in order for him to not get mobbed, they would lock arms together and sort of make a beeline to the bar or wherever they needed to go into the lobby, and they'd sing together, yum bum ba, yum bum ba, yum ba dum ba da da, and they would that, which is the beginning of an American in Paris, and Michael would say, that's how you pick the tempo. Just imagine Gershwin and K-Swift walking up the aisle together so Gershwin wouldn't have to get mobbed by fans.
That's awesome. I want to go back to Las Vegas Philharmonic for a little bit because, as you mentioned, it's in a city that's known for its entertainment, sports and all these other things. And to have like a classical music organization there, it's kind of unexpected in some ways. What's the collaboration like? Are there any collaborations with, superstars that come in and they're in the entertainment business, for example?
That's an interesting question. It was a question I was asking myself, even though I grew up in Nevada. And when I first came here as a music director finalist, I didn't really know anything. I knew that there was something called the Smith Center. Mm-hmm. The reason I knew this was because about a year, during its first year of being opened, they had a lot of great orchestras coming through. Cleveland Orchestra came through to perform on their U.S. tour. The Israel Philharmonic came through. And Yuja Wang was a soloist here with the Israel Philharmonic, I believe. And then the following week, after the tour was over, she was a soloist, as she is every year with the San Francisco Symphony. And she and I are friends, and she knew that I was from Nevada. She goes, there's this new hall in Las Vegas, and it has an amazing, awesome Steinway, and the hall is fantastic. And I hear that they're starting to look for a music director. You might be interested. So that's how I found out about the hall. And then I came here, and is everything we've said. And yes, Las Vegas is known as an entertainment capital, but classical music is one of the last things you would think in terms of what entertainment is offered in this town. But it is also a town of 2.5 million people. It's a big city, and a good chunk, the majority of people that are now living in Las Vegas are from somewhere else. A lot of them are retired, often from bigger cities, Chicago, New York, northern cities. And so by and large, the people that come to see the Las Vegas Philharmonic are locals. Every now and again, I'll hear of someone that they're here for the weekend and they're somehow decided to get out of the casino and come to see us. But 99.9% of the people that come to Las Vegas Philharmonic are locals, and are also people from larger towns that know of and have been desperate for classical music.
Yeah.
We offer 10 concerts a year, basically one concert a month, 2 in the holiday seasons, and they're almost invariably sold out. People, it's like it's like a desert of that, and there's classical music being grown, and we're watering it, and it's just coming alive. In terms of famous entertainers working with the Las Vegas Philharmonic, that is something that I would like to see happen in the future. There are artists who come through here. I could use a perfect example of someone who I would love to work with to do a symphony concert. I know she hasn't really done one hasn't done one yet, is Lady Gaga. She has a residency here now. And I would love to work with her to create a show. And this would be the perfect place for her to test it and to make it happen. It's the perfect venue. The musicians, she's worked with some of the musicians in her jazz show that she does here. There are 2 local bands, Imagine Dragons and The Killers, both of whom have expressed a real serious interest in doing something with the Las Vegas Philharmonic. And I'm so open to that. And it's just, that is not something that has just been explored yet at that level. But it certainly is there, and the interest is there. Yeah. But I tell you, the majority of the interest of Las Vegas Philharmonic is just to do what only a symphony orchestra can do, which is symphonic music, because we're the only thing in town that does that.
Wow, amazing,
very special. It brings back a memory. this is a typical concert I did that was one of the biggest selling concerts we have yet to. The Smith Center holds 2,055 people. This concert was completely sold out, and this was a piece by Michael Torkey called Ash, which is like a 13-minute piece, a Mozart Piano Concerto number 23, A major, and Beethoven's Sixth. Of course, Michael was there to introduce his piece. Ash had never, it's one of the most performed pieces by an American composer because it was done for ABT, American Ballet Theater, and it's been performed thousands of times at ballet companies. It was the premiere, of course, here. Get this, Mozart Piano Concerto number 23, it had never been performed, to the best of our knowledge, ever by a professional orchestra in Las Vegas. So it was also getting its premiere. Wow. Think about that. And Beethoven's Symphony number 6, we may have been performed by an orchestra 20 years ago. We don't know for sure. Again, Beethoven's Symphony number 6 had certainly never been performed live by the Las Vegas Philharmonic in its 20 years. That was also, in a way, receiving its premiere. Wow. And all three pieces were received equally ecstatically by the audience because it's a completely clean slate. If a composer walks out and said, hey, this is why I composed this piece, listen for this, this, and this, an audience with no preconceptions, they will love it as much as a Beethoven symphony. It's all new. Yeah. It's wonderful.
That's amazing. With your long career doing so many different things, I'm sure there are moments where things fell apart on stage, off stage, before, after. Anything that comes to mind, or?
Well, let's see. One of the funniest ones. Well, not funny for me at the time, but I was one of the first professional engagements that I ever had was. I was doing my master's degree at the University of Illinois, and one of the voice teachers there had a summer program in Germany that did three operas per summer. And it was like opera dinner theater. It was in this little village in Bavaria, and it literally, I think it had 10 little round tables, and people would drink champagne and little snacks, cheese, whatever, and they'd see these little operas. They were little in terms of how they were produced. It was a very small stage, and I was conducting a string quartet, 3 woodwind players and a keyboard player that filled in all the rest. But it was serious repertoire. It was Barbara Seville. We did 10 performances of Barbara Seville, triple cast. We did 8 performances of Rigoletto and 6 performances of Puccini. Oh gosh, I'll think of it. Anyway, it was a lot of opera, and it was the premiere of Barbara Seville. And it was young university level, conservatory level students and conservatory level orchestra. And I was also, the student conductor. And so it's the premiere of Barbara Seville, and the Act 1 finale is very repetitive. It's a march, basically, for a good 10 minutes. Yum, bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba. And so it was started fine. Everything had been fine until that point. And then the lead, Count Almaviva, skipped an entire section. He just had this incredible brain fart. And we had rehearsed so much that the orchestra immediately knew, my little tiny orchestra knew exactly what he did. And so for them, they just went from like this part of their music to like maybe over here to the other page. It was no big deal. Oh, fine. He just forgot 150 bars. No big deal for them. I looked up on stage and I could tell like the other scene was like, oh, okay, well now all these things that we were supposed to do, it's not going to happen. So they adjusted. But for me, I mean, I knew what had happened, but I had, a conductor score, especially opera, has maybe 4 bars, 5 bars per page. I spent I felt like an eternity, like skipping, like furiously skipping, like probably 50 pages of my score to where everyone else had just, they were fine. They were sort of like looking at me like, yeah, see, this is live performance. So that was one of them. I mean, there's been various wardrobe malfunctions that I've had to, a suspender sort of clipping, flopping off, and I having to hold my britches up but now it's so funny. It's like we mentioned earlier how, you first started doing a podcast and technology will fail.
Uh-huh.
And you become adept at it. It stops. It's the same thing with performance. After a while, it's not like I want things to go awry, but I'm sort of like, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. This is going to be fun. How is this? It's almost like I enjoy that moment.
Yeah. It's great that you're able to tell these stories, and I'm sure it's because you've done so many pre-concert talks, you've done so many talks. It's great that you're just able to tell all these stories and they come to mind, because as many of my listeners at this point know, I don't share questions with my guests. I just don't. I like it to be a conversation. I read about you. I listen to some of your past interviews, but I don't share questions because I want it to be in the moment.
No, I'm the same way. It's the best. It's the best if it's a conversation rather than sort of like pre-planned questions.
Yeah. I was going to ask about, one question. It's been the standard. So if guests listen to my podcast, they know this one is coming. It's a life-changing moment, a personal life-changing moment, and a professional life-changing moment.
It's as a musician, personal and professional can often be blurred. Mm-hmm. Something that's personal is often ends up becoming professional. I'll give you one. There, I feel like there have been a couple that have really defined what would happen next, and it's a little bit of a story, but I'll try and be as brief as possible. So I was a little older when I started my path on conducting. I was 26 when I left my hometown, which was Reno, to pursue a master's degree. So I was already four years behind the goal. And then it wasn't until I was 30 that 30 when I made it to New York City, which was where I started I call it my second master's, my artist diploma at Manhattan School of Music. So in other words, it was like 8 years of my life was spent, by the time I graduated, I was 32. So I was, I'd really, actually longer than that, a decade of like pursuing conducting. End up in New York City, graduated from Manhattan School of Music with this degree, and I had nothing. I was going to go to Austria to be a conducting fellow at the Salzburg Festival right after I graduated, which I did. And then I came back to New York, September 3rd of 2002. And I had education concerts in November, 2 weeks of education concerts in November with the New Jersey Symphony. But other than that, nothing. And I still, living in New York, you have to pay rent, right? So dejectedly, I applied to sell CDs at the Met Opera gift shop. That's what I did before in Reno. I sold CDs at a local CD store, and it's like, well, that's all I know. I'll go sell CDs. I know a lot about classical recordings. So I got a job, like 20 hours a week, sitting back there with a fake tie and my name and in the back. And they had an amazing, obviously the Met Opera gift shop had an amazing CD collection, mostly operas. But I was like, what have I done? This is horrible. And so I'm sort of standing back there. I'm sure I had the most forlorn look, like a dejected, basset hound in the back of that store. And in walks one in November. It was in November, right before I was going to do these educational concerts. A friend of mine from when I had started a doctorate at Indiana University, I did a concert with her there. And she had since gone back to her hometown of Santa Barbara and had become the assistant artistic administrator of the Music Academy of the West. And she had just finished having a meeting with Marilyn Horne, who lived across the street from the Metropolitan Opera. And at that meeting, Marilyn Horne said, you know, when you get back to Santa Barbara, you need to start an ad. We need an assistant conductor. We've never had one for the opera program at Music Academy. We just need that because there's so many times where the conductor should be rehearsing with the orchestra, and then there should be someone conducting for the staging rehearsals. So I found the money. Let's make that available. So before she went to the airport, my friend Miwa walked in to buy a birthday present for her best friend back in Santa Barbara. She walks in and she said, Donato, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. It's a disaster. And she said, you know, are you still conducting? And I said, yeah. She said, I just graduated from Manhattan School. She said, you know, I think I might have a job for you. You know, I can't guarantee anything, but you know, when you get home, I'm going home now, I'm going to the airport, send me your CV, your resume, videotape if you have anything, and we'll see what happens. I'm looking for an assistant conductor. Well, I got the job. And that was the beginning of meeting another person at Music Academy on the faculty. He was now the head of music for San Francisco Opera, but at the time he was a pianist, one of the pianists of San Francisco Opera and at the Metropolitan Opera as well. And we became best friends. And a year later, he emailed me and said, hey, you know, the assistant conductor is leaving San Francisco Opera. Are you interested? I said, yes, I'm interested. Well, that got me the job at San Francisco Opera. Mm. And that eventually, you know, that changed my life.
Wow.
If I hadn't been just standing there at the Met Opera gift shop at that moment in a job I hated, I would not hate it, but I felt like it was such a waste of time. I don't know if I would be sitting here right now talking to you.
Wow.
So that was definitely a nexus point. You know, in many ways, it was also that period of time personally, you know, coming back to New York, that was the first time in basically my whole adult life where I was questioning if I had made the right decision. Mm. Before that point, when I was growing up in Reno, it's not that it came easy, but you know, when I was in high school, I had an amazing music band teacher, and that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a band teacher, like the guy that was Mr. Hickman. That was that one teacher in my life. So I was a music education major. Then my horn teacher, I was French horn, that was my instrument. He also conducted the orchestra. And I asked him, hey, can I conduct the orchestra? He said, sure. And I got into conduct. Everything seemed to flow. Like, okay, then the professors at UNR sort of like, you need to get out of Reno and pursue conducting. So I did. I didn't even know where to go. They told me where to apply. I mean, everything was sort of like one after the, you know, it just seemed to flow. And then when I graduated from Manhattan School, I had no money. I had no opportunities. I was just scraping by in terms of having enough for food and rent. My dad and my mom were freaking out. They you know, they were, maybe you should go back to school and get an education degree. And they were helping me out with rent. And I started feeling, I got major depression. That didn't feel like I felt like I was a failure. But it was that rock bottom moment where I thought, you know what, I am still a conductor. Something's going to happen. I just know it. I just need to get out of this crappy job selling CDs and something's going to happen. Little did I know that it was because of that job. So I would say it's that same moment in life that was also, now I look back and I think, you know, I've been so lucky, and if things don't work out, I know that something will happen if I'm still out there in the world, if I'm still willing to ride the wave, is what I've always called it. I will land on my feet.
These are so many great things that are, if young musicians are listening, and I know you've worked with young musicians for many years, including San Francisco Youth Orchestra for, I think, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that they could take away and learn from these experiences. But anything more particular, anything else you want to share and advice to young musicians, young conductors who are struggling in this COVID-19, and even other than the current situation, there, it's not easy to have a music career, as you know. So, any advice based on all your experiences?
I would say, particularly right now, in the situation the entire world is in, is to try your best. And I know that there might be financial struggles that we're all trying to make, or that we're all trying to get through, and financial struggles can often be really stressful and seemingly all-encompassing. But I would recommend to give yourselves a break. Give yourself a break. Give yourself, yes, you may not be able to do conducting right now, or take an audition, or go and meet, go watch a rehearsal of your favorite conductor with your favorite orchestra. That's okay, and it's okay to give yourself time right now to just be. Not force yourself to learn 3 languages and do an analysis of all the Beethoven symphonies. Yeah, those are all wonderful, but one of the greatest things I've watched recently was an interview that Alan Gilbert did with Esa-Pekka Salonen, Marin Alsop, and Antonio Papano. I'm sure it's still up on Facebook, and they were saying. Some of them was like, oh, it's giving me time to this. Esa-Pekka was so honest. He said, to be honest with you, I am completely traumatized. I can't do anything right now. First couple of weeks, and I'm glad he said that, because it is traumatizing. So that's number one, give yourself a break right now. If all you can do is read half of a paragraph of your favorite novel and then watch, South Park, I mean, okay, or go for a swim or go for a walk, just chill out. It's okay. It's a very traumatic moment for for all of humanity. If during the normal times, it's like you said, it's difficult. It's difficult, but it's difficult because it's so glorious. What we have decided is that we are going to walk our own path. And it goes against the grain of especially the American culture. American culture is like, okay, you got to fit in, you got to, do finance, or you need to become a doctor, or you need to do, law, or, there's these, and there are set paths for those. And it's wonderful. And it's great but they're set. Mm-hmm. To become a conductor, even though there might be degrees in conducting, like we've just talked about over this last hour, every conductor has a unique path. Yeah. And putting one step in front of the next and to choose that is such an honorable and worthwhile life pursuit. And I can't say that one path is better than the other, but I will tell you that the act of having the courage to take the path, always to take your own path, is what will lead you into, whether you do become a conductor or not, that path is the story of your life. And just to have that courage to do that, that's all I have to say. I mean, there's no right answer.
Yeah. Lastly, something your followers, people who've known about you and follow your career, don't know about you that you're willing to share with us, whether it's a hobby you don't talk about, or a passion, or some unusual thing that you do that most people don't know about.
The things I'm obsessed with cycling. Not that if you were see me now, I'm a good 50 pounds overweight in terms of what it would require to be the cyclist that I once was, and what is necessary to do cycling well. But I still follow, well, right now all sports are on hold, on hiatus, but I love professional cycling, road cycling, and I still follow the teams. I know I know the cyclists on individual teams in Europe, and I don't only just follow the Tour de France. I follow the Giro d'Italia. I follow the La Vuelta de España. I follow all the single day races in Belgium and in the Netherlands in the spring. I follow a little bit of the cyclocross in the wintertime. So that I'm obsessed with that sport.
Wow.
And I love sports in general. I think I've always, whenever I talk about music to sort of the layperson, I almost always compare it to specific sports. I love sports, but specifically cycling.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think we should do one of these in the future and talk about sports, because I'm also a big fan. Not cycling. I'm one of those people who just Tour de France or some of the major things. But that's amazing. I don't think I've ever met anyone so passionate about cycling. So it's great.
It was the first thing. It just happened at the right time in my life. I was 18, and I was working at this CD store in Reno, and I had a full-time job there while going through school. And one of the best customers, who's still one of my closest friends, he would come in almost every day after his bike ride on his bike. And he had this cool road bike, and I'm like, God, that looks so fun. And he'd come in, and he's like, oh yeah, the Tour de France is going on. I was like, what's that? He's like, well, Greg LeMond is in it. This was like in the late 80s when Greg LeMond was winning it, and he's from Reno. And so I was like, whoa, there's like Greg LeMond is from Reno? I'm like, yeah. And so he's like, you should go on a bike. We should get you a bike and go on a bike ride. And it just was at the right time of my life. And I just got into it. And it was also because of Greg LeMond.
Wow. Anything else you want to share before we end today?
If there's one thing that I would love to see our fellow artists in our profession and our unique artists, the art of making music, is it's okay to, aside from where we are today, I would love to see if more musicians just got obsessed with the art of music making and what it means beyond whether they're just playing clarinet or oboe or piano or violin. It's so often the case that we become so specialized that when we can't even talk about anything else. And all art has a relationship to life. Yeah. And so I would just encourage us musicians out there to have a broader sense of our meaning and how we fit into life.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on. Hopefully we'll do this again in the future, whether it's on Zoom or in person.
I'd love that.
Have a beautiful day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.